Time now for me to do an unscripted video review, for a change, of the movie Glass, which is now in cinemas. And I do recommend that if you like the original Unbreakable, I think you'll get something out of this. Now, that said, I'm really motivated to make this review because I have a lot of frustrations with it. The first hour or so I enjoyed. The ending I really, really didn't like. And I know that the endings of M. Night Shyamalan movies can be, some of them kind of controversial, I guess, in some ways, for some of the creative decisions that he makes. But he's best known as, Mr. Movie Twist guy, and has been since The Sixth Sense. And I think in many ways he kind of peaked a little bit too early in his career with Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, Signs, maybe The Village in there, and a lot of people are very divided on Lady in the Water. And then he had The Happening, which was just a disaster. It's a terrible movie. So The Last Airbender as well. So there's been a lot of really mediocre outings by Shyamalan recently, and Glass was returning to his roots in many ways. Now, originally, I believe he wanted Unbreakable to be 2 movies. I'm not sure he wanted it to be 3. The character of Kevin Wendell Crumb, I just have a few notes here, who is also the Horde and the Beast, played by James McAvoy. He's actually played brilliantly by James McAvoy. Again, like in Split, he's really the highlight of the film. It just absolutely steals the show and is incredibly adaptable. I hadn't really realized just how versatile this guy is. And anyway, so what happened was this character was supposed to be an Unbreakable, but Shyamalan felt that it would just be too unbalanced, that the story of David Dunn's realization that he is this superhuman, and his discovery of his superpowers, along with the relationship he had with Elijah's character being the exact opposite on the polar end of the spectrum, that was really enough, and putting anything else in would just overcomplicate things. So on the interests of balance, the character of the Beast, the Horde, I don't have so many names, I don't know what to actually call him, but Kevin Wendell Crumb was removed. And in 2016, I believe it was, they had, Split was released, and that was actually made for something like less than $10 million. And James McAvoy played the character, and nobody realized it wasn't pitched as a sequel. It was what's considered now a stealth sequel. And we only found out that it was a sequel at the end when there's an end credit scene where we see Bruce Willis as David Dunn again in a cafe, and the Unbreakable music, the music score comes up, and then we realize that actually this is in the same universe. And that was a huge moment, and really was quite profound. But so that was a lot of excitement and anticipation for this film, for Glass. Now, as the name suggests, the film primarily, once you see it, you realize this really is, particularly the revelation at the end, this really is Elijah's story, Mr. Glass. Even though for like the first half an hour he's not in the film at all, it begins with David Dunn trying to track down Kevin Wendell Crumb. He's trying to find the Horde. Of course, he doesn't have much more details on him at that point, and there's a confrontation. At this point, what I really liked was seeing David Dunn all these years later, 19 years later. He's working with his son. The actor's name is Spencer Treat Clark, who is actually the original. I was surprised. I recognized him immediately. It's the original actor who was only a kid at the time in the first film. I guess the guy must be in his late 20s or early 30s at this point. So basically, in the beginning of the film, David tracks down the Horde, they fight, and they're going to fight a little bit more, but the fight is stopped when the police arrive, and both men are arrested and sent to a psychiatric institute. And a doctor by the name of Ellie Staple, played by an actress who I recognized her face. I believe she actually played a hologram in the Firefly film, Serenity, actually. Sarah Paulson. She wasn't very well known, admittedly, back then in the Serenity movie. But anyway, she's done quite a few things since then. But I knew I recognized her face. So this lady is a doctor who takes them to this psychiatric institute and tries to convince them that they aren't as extraordinary as they think they are. So your suspicions are immediately aroused. Is she on the level? Has she got another agenda? She plays it slightly spooky, but just enough just enough kind of empathy with the characters that you kind of go, well, maybe I've got my doubts about it. I don't know where I felt about her. And even just not knowing where you sit with the character in a film like this is enough, particularly with the music, which is very jarring in places, very edgy tone of the film. Even that's enough should be enough to arouse your suspicions. The fact that you just don't know where you stand with it. And I like there's an unsettling aspect to the film. Because it is very tense. It's a proper thriller. All three characters have relationships with family members or friends or people who have been pivotal to their lives or their origin, if you will. Now, for Kevin Wendell Crumb, it's the character of Casey Cook from Split, young woman who he spared as the Beast. The Beast didn't actually kill her. And then, of course, we have Elijah's mother back again. And I also just want to say I really enjoyed the fact that they had flashbacks to Unbreakable they made use of some archive footage there that was I felt really helped to give some closure to aspects of the story, which was nice to see again, and to see how the characters have grown in that time, particularly the relationship with David and his son Joseph. And I wish that had been played up a little bit more. And so everyone has someone on the outside that is actually turns out to be very important to the story. Elijah, mastermind that he is, wants these extraordinary people to be exposed to the world. He wants one big, massive, final climactic fight, and the red herring is that this is supposed to take place in a massive skyscraper in Philadelphia, just like the end of Avengers or any other big massive superhero battle. But of course, this isn't that kind of film. It's not that kind of budget with $20 million, to be honest. But the whole point is that it's a trick. So for those of you who are aware of the ending, of course, there is a massive fight between the character of the Overseer, which is the name that's given to Bruce Willis's superhero alter ego, and the Horde, the Beast, I guess. They fight, and in the end, one of the revelations that emerges is that Sam Jackson's character of Elijah Price, who had caused the original train derailment in the first film, which obviously David survived and then kickstarted everything, Kevin's father was on that train as well. And if Kevin's father had not been killed in that crash, he would not have been raised and unfortunately abused by his mother. And as a consequence of that abuse and trauma, the Horde would not have emerged, and the Beast would not have emerged. And this Beast is able to, he's got massive strength, and he's able to basically survive, gunshots. Now, throughout the film, Dr. Ellie Staple has been trying to convince these three gentlemen that they are, in fact, not supernatural in the way that they are. That there's basically a fairly mundane explanation for all of these incredible things they think that they can do, which is ridiculous, really, because obviously it's just not going to fly with the audience, given what we've seen in Unbreakable, in Split, and in this movie. I mean, the scene at the start where Kevin is literally upside down. Again, okay, the Beast is upside down, and he's climbing the ceiling, and he's throwing a massive table at the Overseer, at Bruce Willis's character, and he catches the table, and it's just. There's no way that you would believe that you're an ordinary person. 19 years David Dunn has been on the streets fighting crime and doing extraordinary things, and having this uncanny ability, to touch a person and then see the terrible things they've done. Give me a break, right? He would not be easily convinced that he's not supernatural, and yet this is the problem. This was one of the first things that really triggered me, if you will, about this movie. The first thing that really pissed me off, which was David is very easily convinced by this, and that weakens his character. It undermines his character. It undermines the progress and the journey he's gone on since Unbreakable, right? The whole purpose of Unbreakable, he was very skeptical about his abilities, and he had to kind of almost reluctantly realize that he was actually super strong and he had these amazing gifts, and Elijah helped to bring that out. And of course then the big twist was that Elijah was actually his supervillain. But that's really the core problem. One of the core problems with this. David Dunn actually is, sitting there in his cell, starting to think, maybe I'm just a normal guy, Elijah. Maybe I'm not really what they think. And it's just like, seriously. I mean, in the first film, he goes to I think it's like a train station, whatever, and he brushes off, I think it's a janitor, and he's able to see that the janitor has these kids locked up in his house, and he goes to his house, and sure enough, they're there. How could you possibly infer that by what? His clothing or his something in his eyes? I mean, there's nothing that could give away such specific information. And she's trying to say that, oh, you're just a very good reader of people, like a magician or something like that. It's really ridiculous. But the thing that really kills that idea is that, his powers of, let's call them oversight, because I kind of like that term given his name, the Overseer. His ability to see these things was used pivotally at a very important point in Unbreakable, right at the end when he finally shakes hands with Elijah rather. When David shakes hands with Mr. Glass, he sees that Elijah was responsible for the train derailment and numerous atrocities leading to the deaths of a lot of people. And he didn't know this. He had no reason to suspect Elijah before they shook hands and realized that he was responsible for it, and that Elijah was trying to find, his counterpart on the other end of the spectrum, his supernatural counterpart. And so that, as a result of that claim against Elijah, David went to the authorities, and Elijah was arrested and placed into an institute for the criminally insane. So Elijah was basically brought to justice for all these atrocities and all these murders. David would be very, very, very convinced of his abilities, and he would not be easily argued out of them, particularly using the very slipshod logic of Dr. Kelly Staple. And that's what the film tries to ride on. And it knows, Shyamalan knows that that this is a superhero film, an unconventional one, admittedly, but he knows that you won't be convinced easily of her arguments. So he has to try to kind of undermine and make David Dunn seem a bit dumber by convincing him. And we're way ahead as the audience. And that's what really frustrated me, because I like the character of David Dunn and I'm rooting for him. And I get it. People are going to say to me, but David, this isn't David Dunn's character. You're going to say to me that, this is the story of Glass. That's why the movie is called Glass. It's about Mr. Glass. And I get it. It is. But, it can be his story without undermining the character of David Dunn. And that's just the first point of contention that I have with the story. And the next point, again, this is I'm spoiling absolutely everything, and I might as well spoil the very end. All three characters die. So I had a feeling in the beginning when David Dunn walks into his home, and he has this flashback to, his wife is standing there at the kitchen counter. You only see the back of her, and I think maybe they couldn't get the actress back, but you're led to believe she died. Now, I just had a feeling he's going to die. Just something came into my head, he's going to die in this movie, and he did. And I was kind of worried about that. Now, it's not that I'm against the idea of him dying, though I don't think he should have died. Elijah's death works. The Horde, the Beast, Kevin Wendell-Crumb, whatever, his death works, right? It makes sense that their story arc comes to a natural progression, to a natural conclusion, rather, and Elijah gets what he wants, and he dies knowing that his plan, his ultimate plan, which is revealed right at the end after everything, that twist, he knows that he's masterminded something big. And so he dies with closure, that he has created, these superheroes, and that he creates superheroes, and that he is now going to reveal that this organization, we find out this evil Illuminati type organization, Clover, let's call it the Clover organization, that they are in fact trying to keep balance in the world and prevent superheroes from emerging, supervillains, super people, let's call them, these extraordinary people from emerging and keeping this equilibrium. Apparently they've been doing this for 10,000 years, and yet they're meeting in public places like restaurants, whatever. Now, what's interesting is that we are, to a certain degree, made to feel sympathy for Elijah. We realize, he wasn't a mistake, and that he had this kind of purpose. to bring about this new age of, I guess, superheroes into the world, to stop them from being constantly suppressed. Because what Ellie Staple does is she goes from city to city, and she tries to convince these extraordinary people that they are not extraordinary, and so that if she can convince them, then she'll leave them and she won't kill them. But if she can't, then she kills them. That's what this organization does. And so that's why she tried to do what she did in this institution. Now, I think that's a pretty good story. The premise of that there's this secretive organization trying to keep superheroes down, and that comic books are in fact some kind of subtle historical record for something that genuinely exists in the world. I think that's amazing. I think it's a really good story. I think it's a really good concept. And this is all given to us right at the end, and it's a big amount of information, just, big info dump on the audience right at the end. But it works. But like I say, it's the deaths and the way there's no bad ideas in this movie, just bad execution. And the person, unfortunately, who consistently comes off second best here is the character David Dunn again, because with Kevin Wendell Crumb, his story arc is he finally, with the help of Casey, he finally gets the light back. He's finally able to once again get control of his body, get control of his mind, and and the thing is, if he was shot by what you think is just a SWAT team guy, but when you see it, you see he has this clover tattoo on his wrist, the guy who shoots him, and so you go, okay, what's that? It's a red flag. That means something, and so he's shot. And if he had been shot as the beast would have survived, but he had to go back. So basically, Casey's kind of used to help him. People have said, is Casey also supernatural? She seems to be like a healer. Maybe, I don't know. Perhaps it's possible. But anyway, she's able to convince Kevin to come forward, and he finally gets some closure. And when he's shot as Kevin, he's mortal, and so he dies. And then there's a kind of a long death sequence, and having watched Deadpool 2, where Wade Wilson just refuses to die at the end. He keeps coming back over and over again, which is very funny. It was a little bit like that. Spoilers for Deadpool 2, sorry. But it's anyway, he goes through all of the remaining personalities, and they all have their goodbyes, and it's a fitting death for him, to finally get kind of ownership of himself again, I suppose, and to be empowered to die on his own terms and not the Beast's terms. Of course, the Beast attacked Elijah Price just before that, because it's revealed that Elijah had effectively led to, yes, he did lead to the creation of the Beast, but he was kind of indirectly responsible for the terrible life that Kevin lived under his abusive mother. So Sam Jackson's character is very badly injured because he has this condition where his bones are incredibly brittle, as we know, Mr. Glass, and he dies. And then, of course, in the battle, when Bruce Willis's character David Dunn had been exposed to so much water and nearly drowned, he's extremely weak and his powers are greatly diminished, so he has to try to recover. And just beforehand, Ellie goes over to him and tells him, take my hand, and he once again has a vision, and the vision is revealed at the end, and he's just drowned to death by a nobody, by a non, just any character, just a one of the Clover guys who's masquerading as a SWAT team guy or whatever, and he's just killed. And you're kind of going, okay, seriously? Is there going to be some reveal at the end where he regenerates somehow or whatever? And, you're kind of, this can't be how it ends. Yeah, I get it. The other two guys died, but David Dunn, what did he do exactly to deserve that kind of fate? So this is the big problem with the movie. It's not the idea that David dies. I mean, although I didn't want him to die, but that in and of itself is one thing. I don't like the fact that Logan died in Logan, but it was a powerful conclusion, and I can accept the ending because that sacrifice actually meant something. In this one, yes, you could argue that his sacrifice means something, but because ultimately it will be used to expose this Clover organization, and then when they're gone, you have this origin story, and this was revealed at the end. This is actually an origin story, right? This is an origin story for superheroes, for hypothetical superheroes that are off-screen around the world. And that's the problem. So David Dunn, unlike Elijah, he doesn't get any closure to his story arc, right? Elijah knows that he's masterminded something brilliant at the end, which Ellie Staples' character realizes. She's standing in the comic book store and she overhears the kids saying, the villain always has the mastermind always has a bigger plan or whatever. And then she goes, oh my God, that's why Elijah, they install all these security cameras. Elijah broke out, managed to record everything on the grounds that happened on the grounds of the hospital, the extraordinary scenes of the beast lifting the police car and the fight and David bending the bars and everything, and so that was exposed to the world. And then at the end, the three family members, Elijah's mother, Casey, and the character of Joseph Dunn, are all in I guess it's another train station or something in a large public area, and Elijah had sent the footage to them to basically show the world and to put it online for everyone to see, and they start to see it go viral. And they're sitting there. It's kind of weird actually, because they're sitting there holding each other's hands, kind of like, we're in this together, justice for our beloved family members or friends who died in this horrible thing. And it's like, yeah, but Joseph has got to be sitting there, holding Elijah's mother's hand, going, your son did try to kill my dad before by unleashing the beast, and Casey, your friend, Kevin Wendell Crumb, yeah, his alter ego, the beast, tried to kill my dad. But we're friends now. It's just a bit much. Now, all that being said, some people have also said, is this an origin story for Joseph, who's going to somehow get his father's powers or inherit his father's mantle, or for Casey or whoever? There's nothing like that, really. And there's nothing. It's basically, if it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage. And you can read between the lines if you want, but there's nothing overt like that made at all. There's no real overture to that. So basically, we're supposed to care more for hypothetical characters off screen that we don't see than the actual death of David Dunn. And no, I mean, I think that's a terrible thing that was done to him, because he dies, looking up at Ellie Staple, believing that he's failed the world. That's what's so heartbreaking. Elijah doesn't. Kevin's arc was, I'm back. I get to die on my own terms, right? And I kind of beat the beast, as it were. The beast is not coming back. And Elijah dies knowing what he's done. David dies in confusion, just being drowned. That's it. There's no justice for him. There's no redemption for him. It'd be very different if he died believing that he'd achieved something, that he'd gone out in some blaze of glory. Now, you can argue that he kind of did, because, the footage is going to be used for a very important purpose. But he didn't know that. He didn't know what Elijah had been planning. And that's why it undermines that character. And I'm sorry, but it's like, the show don't tell. I'm going to care about the characters that are on screen more than hypothetical characters that maybe exist out there. I don't care about any of those people. So I care about our superheroes, the characters in the story. And David Dunn did nothing to deserve it. Now, I get people say, well, M. Night Shyamalan tried to not deliver a kind of predictable story, and well, that's certainly true, but that doesn't mean that it's a good ending for this character. It doesn't mean that it's a righteous ending or a justified ending, or even an ending that really makes logical sense in the context of providing closure to the narrative of the characters. It's not consistent with their story arc, just as David Dunn's being easily persuaded that he's not a superhero is just ridiculous after 19 years and everything that's happened. And it's completely contrary to the story. And that's why it's so frustrating, because I find myself liking so much about the film, and yet it just doesn't get across the line. David dies not realizing what's really going on. And then at the end, a silly ending where they're sitting there, the three family members are sitting there, and they're just watching people, looking on their phones at this footage, and then there's a news report. And this is where things get really daft, because the news report says, something like, I don't know what it is, extraordinary scenes or whatever, footage from this hospital. And they're showing the footage that Elijah had recorded of the battle between the beast and the overseer. And nobody points out the obvious, which is that there were murders. It's like, hello. It's just insane. It's so obviously you could look at it this way. People would look at that footage and go, "Oh wow, that's amazing. It's an interesting viral video. It's probably fake, right?" So there would be this kind of plausible deniability, right? Now we know that Ellie Staple, she just has a breakdown. She screams in the hallway, so she knows. We're led to believe that this really is a crippling blow to this Clover organization that's trying to keep this off the wires. And has done successfully for a long time. But there's no indication that they've been brought to justice and that the villain has been genuinely vanquished. And the big bad really is the Clover organization. And that's what kills me about this, because at the end of Unbreakable, you had just some text come up at the end that says Elijah is, sent to a mental institute for the criminally insane. At least you got that there was justice brought to Elijah then at that point. We needed something like that at the end of this film, I think. We needed something to say, this is the thing. You would look at that and you'd go, well, one of them was a psycho, the Beast, who was running around. He'd injured a man and ultimately led to the death of this man in a wheelchair, Elijah Price. So we saw that footage, and then he was shot, obviously, because he's a danger to other people and he's out of control. So you'd understand why he was shot by a police officer, even though this guy's part of the Clover organization, whoever shot him. But for David Dunn, yes, there's incredible things and these amazing fights and cars being lifted up and everything, but is anyone going to point out the fact that there has to be video footage of David Dunn being drowned in a puddle? I mean, it's like, hello? I get it, like, if you went straight to the police, that maybe if the police were also compromised by this Clover organization, that you mightn't get justice. But the fact that the footage is online, the news headline should be, murder at this institute and extraordinary footage, because then you could say, well, it couldn't be faked because there must be a reason why these people were killed, and they were killed to protect the reality, this truth, to prevent this footage from getting online, that they were extraordinary superhumans. And that's really the biggest issue with the ending that I have. And so we close out on this shot in this large public area, and we're kind of left with a bit of a question mark. We don't know if David Dunn is going to be remembered. There should have been something up at the end, some text saying, the Clover organization were investigated, they were broken up and brought to justice, and it was revealed that, these people were brought to trial for the deaths of probably hundreds of people, perhaps, over the last few decades, no doubt, of extraordinary people that they've either had to kill or basically, in this film, really torture, I suppose. And so that would have been investigated, and you would have got that, at least you would have got that definitive ending that the bad guys were vanquished. All we got was, well, some strange footage was released online. You're led to believe maybe this is a crippling blow to that organization. We don't know. To what extent David Dunn and Elijah and Kevin Wendell Crumb are remembered, and in what way they're remembered. Will David Dunn be remembered as a hero? Don't know. We're not told that. And that's a big problem. That's a big problem, because we know demonstrably that he is a hero. And that's just not how heroes die. It shouldn't be how heroes die, and it certainly doesn't do him any justice. So, these are silly things, and there's 70 people in the walking around in this public area in the train station, whatever, and some people are on their phones and some people aren't, and then the news report, and you're kind of led to believe, well, the world has changed, and you're like, do we have any evidence of that? Do we have any evidence that Elijah's plan really worked and really hurt the Clover organization? No, we don't really. We don't really. I feel really gutted for David Dunn. Because, like I say, if he'd been aware that this is what he was dying for, then fair enough. But he's just drowned to death, and that's it. For me, I think this film adds something to the franchise. I think we call it a franchise, to the saga, to the story of Unbreakable. But not as much as it could have been. Unbreakable is the definitive film. That's really I don't think you're really missing an awful lot here beyond some of the performances and a few moments and a couple of set pieces and also just how great James McAvoy is. But Yeah, I'm frustrated. But look, there's going to be a lot of analysis. There's a lot of people who have all sorts of theories beyond the film, and people talking about it and what they think is going on, and some people thinking that there's some way in which David could be resurrected or whatever. But look, as like I say, if it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage. It's not on screen. It's not there. So I'm just going to go with what I've seen, and what I've seen is. Really good intentions, not very well executed, really. Good ideas, but just not really brought to fruition in the way that they should have been. Anyway, that's my rather long-winded review of Glass. Thanks very much for watching. I'm looking forward to your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.